so that you can make the connection between those two things. Okay. Yep, very good. Okay, sounds like we're on a good roll, so I'll carry on. E kia ana te kōrero ka tinu te tai, engari ka pari te tai. So for those of you from coastal iwi, you'll understand the significance of these images. Te tai tumu is often the time, or the best time of the day, to go out and collect kaimoana. Te tai pari, on the other hand, is a time of the day when it's not good to go out and do that sort of thing. So irrespective of what's happening in the wider world, we know that it's inevitable that at some point during the day or the night, the tides will peak, and at some point during the day or the night, the tide will fall. The other thing about tide, which is very interesting, of course, is that there's a connection to te marama, or the moon. And so there's this tūhono between the tides and the sea, and elements of the environment, and also the moon, the stars, ngā whetū te ao whānui. So from a Māori perspective, the way that we function physically, spiritually, is very much aligned to that phenomena of being connected to the environment and connected to the tides, the moon. So when we talk about marama and marangi and mra and all of those elements, there's a connection at lots of different levels to the world around us. And that's partly what Te Iho Atua emphasises, the fact that we're connected, A, through whakapapa, but B, through the environment, to all of these elements that surround us. So part and parcel of understanding, I guess, hauora in a contemporary context is to acknowledge that the environment that we live in and the environment that surrounds us has an impact on our Mauri. And a lot of these things which impact upon Mauri, we don't necessarily have any control over. So some of the ideas today, we'll sort of explore that, but what we hope the course will challenge you to do is to consider those things in your environment, whether it's up there in Tamaki Makaurau or further north into Taitokero. What are the elements of the environment that you and your whānau live in that you have control over, or that you can exert some sense of rangatiratanga over? And perhaps doing that, you're going to find a way to apply tikanga, kawa or kaupapa within your community. So some of the challenges that you'll face throughout this part of the program anyway, coming together as a whānau and thinking about the tikanga and the kawa that you have, whether that's on your marae, and how might you apply that within a broader community context. Good, it's working. The other thing about Mauri, of course, is that it peaks and troughs. Okay, so it's important to move away from the notion that there's a utopian existence of well-being where we're hitting all our targets with fitness and we're in that mode of peak performance. It's very, very difficult, as any elite athlete will tell you, it's very difficult to maintain peak performance for a long period of time. So when you look at some of the top sports teams, they'll go through periods of periodization where they build towards a particular tournament or a kaupapa, and then they'll lessen the intensity and pull back and go into recovery mode. So when we're talking about Mauri being resurgent and regressive, resurgent really sort of means that Mauri can increase and it can flourish. And that's a really important concept to grasp, that if somebody isn't in an optimal state of health, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't get better. So that's an important idea to sort of understand. And on the other hand, Mauri is also regressive. So Mauri can deteriorate or it can degenerate depending on lots of external factors. The type of kai that we eat, the way that we eat, the way that we express manaakitanga at home, the amount of regularity or the regularity within which we move and we engage within the environment, all of these things can have a bearing and an impact upon Mauri. So much like the ways that you see in front of you, the tide goes out, ka timu te tai, and the tide comes back in, ka pari mai anō te tai. So again, just to re-emphasize the point, the world is constantly changing and shifting. So all of these shifts that occur in some way, shape or form impact upon Mauri Ora, and sometimes that's expressed through Mauri Noho. Again, we don't necessarily have control over some of the environmental factors that do this, but we certainly have a control over the types of tikanga that we might choose to express and practice within our homes, within a whānau environment, or within a community environment as well. So I'm just going to leave this part here, and hopefully I haven't rushed through that too quickly, Mason, but I'm going to try and shift on to the next slide now. And there's 3 points there which are probably, again, quite important. He mea nui I nei kōrero. Nō reira, ka tirohia te āhua o i nei kupu e toru, e ki ana ko te Mauri ora o te tangata, ko i nei momo āhuatanga. So vitality, integrity and energy. And I know that for each of you, you'll have your own iwi words or your own kupu to express what vitality, integrity and energy are. But I guess a point to emphasise there is that nowhere in this discussion do we see the word obesity, and nowhere in the discussion do we see the words carbohydrates, fats, proteins. So those are really important scientific terms, and they're important for scientists, they're important for nutritionists and people who have a career based upon research into those areas. But I guess what happens very commonly is that we tend to mix the two, and sometimes to the detriment of mātauranga Māori. So going to leave those things to the side for this part of the course. And I think that's very important to do, because it's very, very easy to become caught up in discussion around scientific terms, whether that's online or sometimes just things that are read on media and those sorts of things. The other point to make is that right now across the world, there's massive debate and conjecture about what is termed to be the obesity epidemic. The interesting thing about obesity is that it's not an epidemic per se. So, for example, if you hongi someone, you don't become obese automatically. Okay? It's not contagious. If you touch someone, if you shake their hand, that person that you shake hands with doesn't automatically become obese. So it's a word which needs to really sit outside of this discussion around mātauranga Māori, because there's lots of misconceptions about what that word implies. The other thing which is fair to say too is that when we're talking about kickstarting a wellness journey, it's very, very important to find words and to find kaupapa that reinforce the notion of being a mana enhancing journey and being a WAIRUA enhancing journey for the whānau. So part of the program that we're doing, Poupou Pakari Tinana, is about offering whānau another way to kickstart their journey of transformation towards Mauri Ora. So it's important to keep some of those terms out, like obesity, because it's one of these things which can be very, very difficult to get out of your mind if that's constantly planted in the back of someone's consciousness. So for the time being, and throughout most of this course, we don't go there, and we try to focus more on some of these Māori concepts and words and kupu that our ancestors have used as well, in order to find the kaupapa or the foundation upon which to base a wellness journey on. So hopefully that point has been made, but it's something which I think would be really, really valuable for you as a class to have a discussion about. Where should somebody start in terms of a Māori wellness journey? So again, those are things that I know that you'll be able to have a kōrero about within your class. You'll see a picture there of some tamariki who are flourishing. He Mauri Ora te āhua o ngā tamariki nei. Nō reira, ko te tikanga, he tohu i te ora o te tangata, ā-roto, ā-waho, ko ngā taha e whā, taha whānau, taha WAIRUA, taha hiningaro, tainua atu hoki ki te taha WAIRUA. So talking about Māori is also a reference to all four of these areas of a person's holistic well-being, being in a good space. And again, it's another important component of what constitutes a flourishing Mauri. Some of these pictures here, you'll see people of all ages, from all sorts of backgrounds and contexts. And it's important also to recognise that people can flourish and languish at the same time. Okay, part of the key, I guess, to having a rangatiratanga over wellness, over Mauri Ora and oranga, is to be able to manage health issues as they come up. And that's a massive challenge for a lot of whānau, and that's one of the great things about toi tangata and other rōpū as well, is that you're providing a way of empowering families to manage some of the common issues that come up in terms of health, but to also make some real progression in terms of transformation on the wellness journey as well. So all of these things here on the left are indicators or tohu of Mauri Ora, the things which might sort of tell us that, hey, this whānau or this particular collective are flourishing. And the pictures hopefully give you that sense of understanding about being in that space. To contrast that, and we referred to that whakatauki, I think the last time we had a kōrero mason, tamatu, tamaora, tamanoho, tamamate, Mauri tu, Mauri Ora, Mauri Noho, Mauri mate. So there's aspects of existence which impact on Mauri. And the pictures are probably a little bit over-exaggerated, but you'll get the idea that there's certain characteristics or certain elements that lead to a languishing Mauri, that lead to somebody being in a space of Mauri Noho. Again, it's important to recognise the fact that Mauri is never fully extinguished. Okay? For as long as something or somebody is alive and well, or alive, the Mauri is always there. So the challenge for you as health workers or health champions, people who are working in hauora environments, is to find the tools to be able to reignite Mauri Noho, and to shift someone from this space, where the Mauri is languishing or it's dormant or it's stagnant, and to shift them across to a space where they're able to reawaken their Mauri Oras. So there's elements here like chronic pain, inflammation. For somebody who has a condition as straightforward as gout, it impacts on all areas of somebody's life, of course. There's a massive pain that comes with having a gout attack, and it can go on for a long, long time. So those are things which are very, very important to manage in order to flourish in other ways. Negative relationships, we have a lot of work to do in terms of giving greater support to people who are trapped in negative relationships. What can we do as health workers, as whānau ora champions, to be able to empower people who might feel that they're locked into a negative relationship, to turn that around and to find a way to flourish and to work together. So those are some of the massive challenges that we face right now in 2015. So all of these elements are not necessarily physical. Some of them are intellectual, some of them are social issues, but they're aspects which contribute to being in an overall state of Mauri Noho. Okay, and you'll see there in front of you, right in the middle of those two tables, te taha WAIRUA, te taha Hinengaro, te taha Tinana, and te taha whānau. So one of the discussion points I hope that you might have as a rōpū is how might you use a framework such as this one. You might have a variation on this, but how might you apply this to the communities of families that you work with? If you're working with tamariki or taiohi, rangatahi, is there a way that you can perhaps apply this model or this type of model to trigger or reawaken a sense of Mauri Ora within a collective or within an individual as well? So those are some of the really big challenges that we face at this point in time. So I'll leave that there, but I'm hoping at some point you'll be able to revisit this, and you may decide, hey look, I can find areas of my own life that I think are on this side and areas that might be on this side. And I can certainly see that myself. Looking at Te Taha Tinana, for example, I know there's elements that I need to shift across to Te Taha Matou in order to flourish. Okay, so it's possible to break it right down and to identify things which might be work-ons for you, or it might be part of your life journey to go through some process of transformation from languishing to flourishing. Okay, I hope I'm not going too fast, but I'm going to shift into the next part of the presentation, which is just looking at the actual process of shifting from languishing to flourishing. For some people, this might be one particular moment, a realization, an awakening that they might have. A lot of people have that occur within their lives. For other people, this process of transformation can take years or months or weeks. I think it's very important to not put a time frame on bringing about a shift from Mauri Noho to Mauri Ora. It's best to give an open-ended time frame to these kinds of things to happen. When everything is in place, when everything is in the right space, things will begin to happen. But you'll see there from the pictures in front of you too, and I've just pulled out the dark horse as a very brief example, but both of the main characters in the film were on a journey. Okay, they were both going from journeys from languishing to flourishing, but as you'll remember from the movie, they went back and forth between both states right throughout the film until they got to the very end. So that's an important concept to really get a grip of, because it's exactly how things happen in Te Ao Māori. We're not necessarily always in a flourishing state, and things can impact upon us in terms of WAIRUA, Hinengaro, Tinana and whānau, which might put us into a languishing space or a flourishing space. So again, just some images there to, I guess, emphasize the journey that occurs. The other key difference, I suppose, if you were to compare a wellness journey that's premised or based upon Kaupapa Mauri, is that it's not necessarily about the endpoint or the destination. It's very much a bit of a trap to think that when we do this, this and this, our lives or our wellness, our health will be good for the rest of our lives, because it doesn't really work like that. And we know when we look back into kōrero pūrākau, when we look into the kōrero about atua, that there was always this constant state of flux. And so the wellness journey, as we sort of view it here, is really more about the way that you conduct the journey and not so much about the destination. Arriving at a particular destination might mean that an aspirational wellness goal has been achieved. Completing Ai Māori for a lot of whānau is a massive aspirational goal, and then it becomes a realistic objective. But when that's completed, there's always other things to work on and always other aspirational tūmanako or wawata to shift towards. So some of the things here in front of you are just really important reminders about what might constitute a wellness program or wellness journey. So for those of you who are working with families or kohanga reo, kura kaupapa, and those kinds of environments, it's a journey that becomes very, very important. So on the note of atua, and it's probably fair to say that in Māori health promotion circles, we often like to talk about atua and the influence of atua on wellness and health. And that's a really important concept, again, to acknowledge and understand. The other element of well-being in terms of drawing from the past is looking at the role of kōrero pūrākau and trying to figure out or decode some of the kōrero pūrākau that are commonplace in Te Ao Māori and also Pacifica as well. We share a lot of traditions that are very, very similar to our Pacifica whanaunga. The Maui tradition in particular has a lot of synergies in terms of other perspectives around the Pacific with our own iwi variations of Maui. And you'll see the picture there of, well, that's intended to be Maui and his brothers fishing up their ika. That's really a metaphor for finding a kaupapa in one's life. Most of you will remember the kōrero. Maui hid in his brother's waka. They went out to the usual fishing ground. to go and catch their quota of ika, and then Maui appeared from the waka and he urged his tuakana to carry on paddling further out beyond visibility of land. And they kept questioning them and saying, why do we need to do this? Aha te take, e ki ana koe me haere tonu ke tai atu ki te au moana. And Maui had an understanding that in order to flourish, they had to move beyond their comfort zone. So he knew that somewhere out there was a kaupapa, a new world, a new place that he could establish himself on or re-establish himself. And so he urged his brothers to pull up the anchor and to carry on out to the deepest parts of the ocean. And so that whole kōrero pūrākau is really yes, as I said, a metaphor for life. That the wellness journey for whānau is about finding a set of values, a set of kaupapa, or a philosophy that they can base their own wellness journey on. So, for example, people who are from Ngāi Tūhoi will have Ngāi Tūhoi values. They're going to be very, very different to people from Ngāti Porou, who have Ngāti Porou values. They're going to be very, very different from people who have grown up in the Waipareira community in West Auckland, who have a really close link to the families within Waipareira. Manukau, all of those areas around Tamaki, there are slightly different values for each community. And so part of the wellness journey is really about families and communities searching for their kaupapa in life. From an individual view, it's also about an individual finding the thing in life, the kaupapa in life, that enables them to fulfill their aspirations. And so these pictures that you see of people paddling their canoe, paddling their waka, are just really to reinforce the value of kōrero pūrākau within the wellness journey. And so at Te Whānau Warakawa, what we've tried to encourage students to do is to really think about pūrākau from within their own community or their own iwi, and to use those as a basis for finding a particular kaupapa in life. Okay, so I think we might have brought this model up last time, so I won't spend too long on it, but it's really just to show you a diagram of how Whakato Mauri can occur, or how that process of transformation can occur. The first thing that needs to happen is to recognise that there is a languishing Mauri. If that doesn't happen, and we know this from experience within Te Ao Māori, if we don't recognise those tohu or those signs, a whānau will tend to stay in that state. So part of the challenge we face again as Māori health promoters is to give families, whānau, people the tools to be able to recognise the tohu, which indicate that Māori might be in a space of Mauri Noho, and to then give people the tools to reignite it and to move towards a state of Mauri Ora. Okay, just moving on a bit now. So we've talked a little bit about the environment, and I won't spend too long on this, but there are elements of your own community that I know that you'll say are take mōrearea. So mōrearea means to have a potential risk or a threat, or to perhaps have some element of danger to it. And haumaru, of course, is something which provides protection or looks after people or the environment. So within your environment that you live, the environment or the community that you work, I'm sure that you'll be able to identify particular aspects within your community which might be a threat to health and well-being. And I'm not going to spend too long on these. All of these elements are commonplace throughout the environment, unfortunately. Those are things that we have to grapple with day in and day out. The way that we manage these risks, of course, is going to sort of determine the state of Māori that we're able to exist in as well. The second page here, you'll see that cultural identity, for example, is very important. Having a secure cultural identity is something which people are searching for a long, long time. So, for example, we have people who come to us who are on the journey to find or to identify their own whakapapa and to make those connections and linkages. So that's very, very important. If we go back to the pūrākau about Maui, part of the journey that Maui Tiki Ataranga was on was to uncover the mystery as to who his father was. And he went on that search as well to try and find the clues to enable him to identify his birth father and to meet with him. So there's a kōrero pūrākua about that. But to come back to these elements, some of the Take Haumaru will be an important part of your community. When we look at that list there, tamaki makaurau, affordable housing is a massive challenge for every whānau. So it's not necessarily the case in Foxton, which is down here on the west coast, where affordable housing is a reality for some families. But again, down here we challenge with a lot of unemployment, as is the case up north as well. Ko tēnei mea te whakakore ngā take mōrearea, he WAIRUA no tērā, he WAIRUA no hoki te mahi kia hāpaitia ngā take haumaru. Nō reira, koera no tētahi wahanga o te kaupapa nei. Engari, ko te tapu me te noa, tētahi atu wahanga nui o te ao Māori, kāre pē te tino kitea I roto I ngā kāinga katoa I enei rā. So tapu and noa is another critical element that contributes to Māori well-being. It's not necessarily as widely observed as it was in pre-Pākehā times. So tapu and noa, of course, you will all recognise what those elements are and what they mean. But to give you some examples, there's a few pictures that are listed up here. So why would people wearing kumara be deemed to be in a tapu state? That's because the outcome was very, very important. And so they had to be free of distraction, focus on the task, and if they didn't do their job properly, then the next process of harvesting kumara would be unsuccessful. So that had a real strong bearing on whether or not papakainga would have enough kai to get through winter. So all of these elements that you see, these photos, are very commonplace practices, either in the past or in present day, around tapu, the observance of tapu and noa. The ope going on to the marae there, moving into a space of tapu, te marae ātea, and part of that pōwhiri process is to be able to get to a position where the tangata whenua feel okay about bringing them into a noa space. And part of their job, of course, is to negotiate that space with the manuhiri and to ensure that they're coming in peace, obviously, and they don't have any hidden agendas. So by allowing them to come into the whare, they're also acknowledging that the tapu will be lifted upon those people going on to the marae. These are things that I hope you might be able to have a kōrero about in your class at some point. There's some examples here, and I know that you'll be really familiar with all of them, if not most of them. The side there which says noa are really safe places or safe spaces. So when we think about a kohanga reo, a kura, or a wānanga, a modern wānanga, we would expect that those would be safe places to send our tamariki to, safe places for our kaumātua to come into, where there are no risks, no threats to their Māori. I've put te kāinga on the noa side because ultimately that should be a safe place, a haven for people to live, to coexist. And so these are spaces which traditionally anyway have been regarded as being noa or safe areas. Obviously we know that sometimes this is always the case. So again, a challenge for those of you working in the community to try and find a way to apply these elements to the world in which our families live. The word tapu is quite interesting, and Captain Cook, that some of you will know, heard this term when he came through the Pacific and through Hawaii, and then called tapu taboo. And so that's where the word taboo comes from. It came about in the 1700s. The word ture is another Maori word which has been taken from another language. So ture has come from the word tora. So there's a bit of a reverse thing which happened there, but tora was one of the words used by the Hebrew scholars, by the Hebrew movement, to indicate a law or a principle. So there's some words in here which people often say, well, tapu is a transliteration of tapu. It's not the case. Tapu is an important word right throughout Pacifica, throughout Hawaii, Tonga, Samoa. There's variations on the word, but it's part and parcel of the indigenous peoples of this part of the world. You'll see the word Rāhui there, and that's something that we just want to talk about very, very briefly. Rāhui is really a variation or an application of tapu. So we were in Pukekohe 2 months ago, and we went for a bit of a hikoi at Pukekohe, and within a 20-metre radius of where we were, there were 5 bottle stores, or 5 places which sold alcohol. So our rōpū up there were able to identify those as being contemporary environmental risks. And the challenge that we put before them was to ask the question, do you think you could apply, or your kaumātua would be in a position to apply a Rāhui to these risk areas? And the response was, maybe they could, but then others weren't so sure. So there is no definitive answer, but it's a question that we need to ask. Because if we can't apply our own tikanga or kawa to mitigate these threats, then the repercussions obviously are going to increase over time. So you'll see in front of you again some of these common urban risks or threats to Mauri Ora. KFC, McDonald's, all of those sorts of places are not necessarily bad places, but when they're not managed through a particular kawa or through tikanga, they become a threat to wellness and well-being. So that kind of goes back a bit to the point we discussed before around this word obesity. And I've said to you that it's not contagious. You can't touch somebody and it happens. It's the cumulative effect of returning to KFC 3 times a day that contributes to that state, or a state of Mauri Noho, sorry. So the challenge for us as Māori health promoters is, can we apply a Rāhui to these places? If the kaumātua that you work with and work alongside were in agreement with you to say that these places represent a massive threat to the wellness of our tamariki, is there a way that by working together with your kaumātua you could find a solution through Rāhui? I can't give you the answer to that, but I do think it's something that you might want to discuss within your whānau or within your marae or within the people in your community, the kaumātua in your community, to try and find a way that you might be able to use tikanga Māori or kawa or a Rāhui, for example, to mitigate the impact of bottle stores or to mitigate the impact of processed foods within your community. The photo down the bottom there is a rural issue that confronts a lot of Māori communities in the Lower North Island. That's actually the impact of farming on WAIRUA. And at in the Manawatu River at the moment, there's been some tests done in the last 2 years which suggest that the Manawatu River is highly polluted as a result of the impact of dairy farms right down the Manawatu River. So we're going through a process at the moment of trying to mitigate that risk. And the question has come up from time to time, is it time to put a Rāhui on cows and cattle and dairying and all those sorts of things? It's a very, very difficult space to work in and negotiate. But again, those are some of the questions that I know that you might be able to talk about as a group. I'll leave this one here. This is really just reinforcing some of the key elements of tapu. And then there's some examples of applied tapu. You have a Rāhui, waiwai tapu, we showed you the picture of people going onto a marae, a kawa, and we'll talk about that shortly. Whakapapa, there's elements of whakapapa which make it an applied form of tapu, te ako. So we'll give some very quick examples of those shortly, and I think that will probably be enough for today. But again, just to understand that Noa is it's often translated by people like Alston Best as meaning profane. But there's some better ways of viewing Noa. It's really to identify that something is safe, it's risk-free, it's a place where it's okay for tamariki and mokopuna to be in or around, and it doesn't necessarily present a threat to people or a threat to the environment. So just to kind of come to the end of this component really, we know that Tapu and Noa is something which is observed very, very strongly on our marae. Perhaps it's not observed as widely in our households, in our kāinga. And again, it's one of the challenges that we ought to bear in mind. What we do know, of course, is for most Māori families, there's an understanding that there is an existence of Tapu and Noa, and that it is a part and parcel of being Māori. It's part of our cultural identity. One of the challenges, though, is to try and identify how it might be made more relevant, or how we might share this information with our families, with our whānau, so that they're aware of the significance of Tapu to Mauri Ora and the significance of Noa to Mauri Ora as well. All right, we're nearly there. Just to really come back to Kawa though, and this is something that we'll try to pick up on in the next presentation. A Kawa is something which is a very, very complex concept, but what it really does, it's a way or a tool of helping groups of people regulate safe entry and exit into the domains of various atua. So, Rogomatani, you'll see the picture of these people weeding, harvesting, growing kumara. You'll see all of these karakia in books by Peter Kapiti, who was a Ngāti Porou Tohunga, where there's endless karakia for working with kumara and being in the space of rūma. You'll see the black fence here, entering into the domain of two, and the way that they're doing that is through their haka. The haka is specifically composed for their kaupapa, for their team. Te kapa ōpango, which was composed by Derek Lardeli, which I know many of you will know Derek. Derek's haka was something which had a contribution from players within that team, within the All Blacks. So those are all mechanisms, for want of a better word, to enable people to move safely into a particular atua domain. You'll see the man doing the whittle, bringing people into the marae ātea, the domain of tūmatauenga. And so again, a kawa is something that was applied very, very commonly in pre-Christian society in Aotearoa. And one could argue that we only tend to see this, most times anyway, on the marae. So again, the question is, how can we use kawa to mitigate the risks to health and the risks to Māori by finding a way to enable us to move more safely into the environment of various atua. This model here, the tikanga model, you'll see that often tikanga are translated as being ture, or being a set of rules that are imposed by the Crown or the government or a headmaster, a tumuaki. But the other way of viewing tikanga, of course, is that they grow out of a papa or a base. So when we think about Hene Ahone, it was being grown out of the land. Kaupapa emerge from a particular base, from papa tuanuku. They're organic. And tikanga are really the expressions of the values that make up that base or that foundation. So it's a different way of looking at tikanga, getting away from this notion, of course, that tikanga, it sets of rules that are written on the board in the classroom. And as opposed to that, trying to view tikanga as being an organic and natural expression of the kaupapa that you have. So whether that's eating healthy kai, or whether that's exercising on a regular basis, if that's your kaupapa, then obviously your tikanga will be an expression of those values. So something to talk about, and I know that you might have some different views, which is fantastic if you do, about how you perceive tikanga. Just to really finish off, a quick example of a modern kawa. Te Wānanga Kawa has students that come to this place from around Aotearoa, from Australia, from Pacifica as well, sometimes further afield. So how do we manage all of that? We have what's called a kawa, te kawa o te ako, and it promotes a safe learning environment for students and a safe environment for staff. And it's not written down, But when all of our people come into the wānanga at the start of the year, the karakia engages them in the kawa. And so really it's about high expectations, high performance in the classroom, of course, in the learning environment, and an expectation that they'll succeed. We'll do our best to ensure that our tauira succeed. So this is just an example. Actually, it's a way to show to you that you can apply a kawa in a modern context. We tend to hold on to fragments of what we had in the past. So a lot of the karakia that we often use are small parts of a verse of a bigger karakia that we once had. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the challenge that we have, of course, is to try and find a way to apply kawa to the modern environment. So again, some of these things that I showed to you before, the way that our students engaged in their kawa is through a karakia. The kaupapa is a set of values, a set of expectations that we have for our students and that they have for our staff here at the wānanga. And then the tikanga that are expressed are really just a reflection of the kaupapa that are in place here. Just to finish off, and I know that you're all very familiar with the Whare Tapa Whā model, but again, Mauri has a part in all of these four spaces. So taha, WAIRUA, hinengaro, Tinana, and whānau. Somebody can be immobile, for example. If somebody is restricted in terms of their movement, that doesn't necessarily mean that they cannot be in a Mauri Ora space. What becomes important for that person and their family is to be able to manage their situation so that they can flourish in other ways. Somebody who has dyslexia or is a dyslexic learner can't necessarily read. That doesn't necessarily mean that their Mauri is going to languish. What it does mean is that there needs to be a strategy in place for that person to manage that learning challenge that they have. So there's all of these elements which always impact upon either WAIRUA, Tinana, hinengaro, or whānau. But again, the challenge is to manage those so that we can flourish. Okay, I think you've seen all of these before, but these are again just some examples of those four domains. WAIRUA is very, very interesting. It's a place that we're still exploring. What we know though is that WAIRUA isn't necessarily about just going to church every Sunday and doing those kinds of things. WAIRUA has a much broader connotation to it. Part of te whakahiki te WAIRUA, te whakapiki te WAIRUA, is getting out into the environment and engaging in a physical and a spiritual way with tangaroa, with tāne mahuta, and all of those atua domains that we talk about. So a good wellness program should really incorporate all of those elements in some way, shape or form. Okay, hinengaro, sorry, again, it's very important to have a curiosity about learning, and we hope that people will have a curiosity about hauora and waiora and all of those sorts of things in this particular kaupapa. The other important building block that we all understand to be critical in terms of getting a good outcome is having positive relationships, and that doesn't mean just as adults, that also applies to tamariki and mokopuna, having opportunities in their lives to engage with other people, with other whānau, with other communities, to broaden their horizons too. So just to really conclude and to sum up, the second part of the presentation we looked at kawa, and I'm hoping perhaps, Mason, that as part of the discussion, the people within your rōpū might be able to think about kawa from within their own community or their own marae, and whether or not there's a kawa that might be applied for a contemporary aspect of engagement. So that's Te Whakato Mauri. Sorry, it's a very, very brief overview, and I'm not sure that you've caught everything, but really, really good if you've got a bit of time to perhaps discuss 3 or 4 of the key points from this presentation. And then that leads us into the next component, Te Whakaoho Mauri, which is the next part of this kaupapa too. And it might be possible for us to come up in person, and it might be one thing that Darcy does next time around. So we'll see how we go anyway. Koe anō rā, ko tā mātou I konei mihi kawa tu ki a koutou o toi tangata. I tō manawa nui, i tō manawa roa, kia whakaronga kia titiro mai ki ngā kōrero kai tēnei taha, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.